Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we look at Two Metaphysical Blades by Chris Wraight and to the spears wielded by Russ and Valdor. Their origins, their abilities and their role, if any, in Russ and Valdor during and after they leave the Imperium. Spoilers for that short story, let's get straight into it. Buried beneath the earth's surface is a forge. Engines belch, straddling the abyss on stone-cut piers, beating their iron hearts and churning the runnels of molten metal amid bounce fountains of sparks. And here people labour, wearing the Sigillite's icon. And this time is before the Imperium is conceived, and there is the Emperor's first citadel, and in its heart, surrounded by a pentacle, within a circle, within an octagon, is a lone anvil on which we can assume the spears were forged. And clearly magic of some sort was involved with the shapes that have been established around it. And then around its perimeter are 20 columns, also marked with symbols. And as you look into the gloom around the anvil, figures can be seen there, at some times, and not at others. The 20, I will assume, is perhaps linked to the creation of the Primarchs, but it's a little early, so I would say it would be the 20 Thunder Warrior groups that were formed around this time that it is related to. And perhaps some effect from the warp can be felt within those bubbles of shapes, where you can see people come and go, perhaps some effect on time as Malcador later establishes on Titan to help the Grey Knights. Then Malcador appears, and it's noted he is distinct, and it feels like he has been here for a long time. And nearby, rotating within a suspensor field, are two spears, both covered in power mechanisms and energy lines, and the book says they are two slivers of fate to be thrown into the sea. This reminds me of something the Emperor says to or about Sanguinius, that he is a throw of the dice, a gamble. Like all, perhaps their attempts to subvert some fate he sees coming, chaos. The Emperor explains them. Two principles, intoxication and restraint, flux and stasis. The Dionysian and the Apollonian. Malcador snorts, old gods, he says, for a godless world. It will not stay godless forever. Perhaps, is the Emperor's intriguing response, hinting at the knowledge of chaos perhaps. Dionysus clearly references the god Dionysus, who is god of wine and dance, of irrationality and chaos, representing passion, emotions and instincts, and Apollonian spear, Apollo, and Apollo is the opposite, representing a calm, reasoned and structured approach. We see in one of the recent Siege of Terror books, Urdu references the Emperor invoking mythology, trying to capture some of its power. I believe she says he has modelled himself after some of the mythological beings he has learned of, perhaps how he represents himself to other people, the aspect he shows of himself to them. And the Emperor says regarding the spears that they are opposites, and perhaps some of that thinking that I just mentioned also goes into the naming of the spears. That's what I was getting at. Elsewhere on Terra and pre-Imperium, the earth is rad-stained, wastes are the haunt of blood tyrants, and the polluted sky crackles with ill-directed barbarian energies. The Thunder Warriors are around but untested. Little stands against these hordes, and we join Valdor in the now distinct golden armour, and it's noted before he would just wear what was fashioned for him. He's about to fight and keep the early dream that the Emperor has alive. An army shambles towards him, carried to war on the back of leaking half-tracks and war trucks. Dozens of banners flare and snap in the briny winds, giving away a score of fiefs and allegiances, none of which are destined to survive this day. They are already firing, ploughing up the ground with pintle-mounted stubbers and projectile cannons, yet Valdor waits, gauges and studies. Only 20 Legio Custodes stand with him, but when they move, you cannot judge the movement. They are already onto second and third strikes. Valdor is in that slaughter, the kills he performs already chosen. A half-track bears down on him, and it might run him down, but then he is carving his way straight through it with broad sweeps of a weapon that has a flying corona of gold and silver, severing axles fly apart, and the armour plates spin and spiral. When he reaches the engine unit, he provokes an explosion that devours the entire reeling structure through which he strides unharmed, the flames clinging to him like regretful caresses, and soon after he faces those instigators of attack. As the book describes her, she is taller than she ought to be, broad and swaddled with stem-bulked muscle. Her spine is a web of nutrient tubes, her lower jaw a griddle of bloody mandibles. Scatterfields make her boxy outline blur when she moves, and a vox scream accompanies every gesture. They fight, and the spear he bears shatters the stem-bulked gristle, and when the blade hits, his mind is flooded, and he knows her. Rebecca is her name, and how she has embraced violence rather than become its victim, and more than that. And then she is dead, and Valdor hears from the Emperor. About now he understands the spear. It uncovers the truth, and the Emperor says it will check Valdor's power. Killing has become too easy for him, and the soul stories of his victims will stop this. Elsewhere, Lemon Russ is given his spear, a blade for his achievements during the Great Crusade. Valdor speaks to him. Valdor warns Russ to be wary of the spear, though he seems to have that sense of it already. And Valdor observes at this moment that the Great Wolf seems to hate him and his spear, whilst Valdor quite likes the Wolf King, and he warns Russ to listen to the spear when it speaks. As the Great Crusade happens, the Apollonian spear is used openly. Russ's is not used, and this remains the case after the Crusade, and it's only when Russ hunts Horus on the vengeful spirit that he uses and listens to the spear. After the Emperor's death, Valdor again speaks with Russ. Valdor says that they have failed. Russ says that his spear illuminates those it strikes, Horus in the case of its one use, the opposite of Valdor's. Valdor still thinks that there is something to the Emperor's plan. Russ thinks they're all dead, the Emperor's plans. But Valdor warns that Russ can not get rid of the spear. It will continue to appear and haunt Russ if he does. And they share a moment. Russ says the greatest sin on Fenris is to fail your Jarl. And Valdor places his hand on Russ's shoulder and gives him a faint pressure of reassurance and says, there are sagas yet. Time moves on one last time in the tale, and we find each spear carrier. With Russ, the unused spear is now mocked, but one day it's left on a backwater shrine world, only for Russ to drop his drinking horn later, when it returns to be seen by his eyes only, the actual physical spirit self still in the shrine. And it says something. It tells him to listen. And he feels a call away and says that he will return for the wolf time and leaves with some companions on some unseen mission. Valdor, on terror, looks out of his window and for a moment sees Fenris and says out loud, so soon, and knows he too is going to be called away. He, like the Wolf King, is bound by laws, even if they are of his own making at this point, and he leaves no clue behind. And it's noted here that his path has been prepared for a long time, and that he fights alone. And Valdor wonders if him being called is a desperate chance against unthinkable odds. Both spears now are silent, and they wait. Metaphysical blades, each the mirror of the other, instruments of illumination for bearer and victim, resting in the darkness, waiting for an owner, opposites, as it was once said in some ways. And now, friends, I turn things over to you. I really love the insight into the Emperor, Valdor, and the Wolf King, how they're placed as opposites, and wonder what role these blades could play in the future of Imperium. What plan does the Emperor have for these two guys? I would love to know. I'm not sure we'll ever actually find out, but I would love to know. If there are any books that cover those events, or any books that hint at them, let me know and I might do a video on them. If not, I'd just like to read them myself. I hope you enjoyed this overall. I very much did. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.